Hey guys, I just wanted to share some of my thoughts here. I'm Guy Against the Grain. This is actually my first video, and I've been thinking about a number of things that I wanted to do with this channel, but have avoided getting started. So I've been thinking about some things over the past 24 hours, and I'm just going to go ahead and just share my opinion unfiltered. Just this morning in the news, I was hearing about the mayor-elect of New York City, Zohran Mamdani. How do we get to a place where someone who's an avowed socialist is running the most notable, one of the largest United States cities? How do we get here? I read that he got over 50% of the vote. Culture's changed, right? I don't think someone of these political views would have been elected 20 or 30 years ago, right? But you think about what caused this change. And just a week or so ago, I work in the healthcare field, and I was talking to some of my female coworkers, and they were telling me how they don't get any maternity leave. They have to use whatever vacation they have built up. They have to, they can do like some short-term disability, but it's not 6 weeks or 12 weeks of paid vacation like I've heard in other places. And these are hospital systems that they're working for. So some of these women, you know, they want to go back to work, but I think deep in my heart, deep in their hearts, if they had the choice to stay home, they probably would. You know, they'd probably stay home and raise their baby, at least in the early years. So, somebody's calling me.
Right of human devising. When we accept.
So, that's one thing. If you look at the stakes in the United States, no paid maternity leave. I work in the healthcare field, and as many probably know, healthcare statistics in the United States are not very good, right? Infant mortality is relatively high compared to what we spend. Health outcomes, chronic disease are very high in the United States, right? We're eating a lot of toxic food, right? It seems like what we put in to the healthcare system, we generally just don't get it out, right? You look at some of the major cities, even some of the smaller cities in the United States, it's not very safe. If you've ever traveled abroad to Europe, there's actually, in some cases, not all, there's probably, you're safer over there than in some of our major cities and even smaller cities. So I think right now in the United States, we have this sort of this recipe for, you have major cities electing a socialist mayor, right? Because there's so many claims with socialism. There's so many claims of, you know, the government being the savior and being able to help people, right? It sounds really good to have a guaranteed standard of healthcare, something, even though it's not very good. It sounds good. You know, if some countries that are socialist pay for 6 months to a year of free maternity leave. Other countries provide childcare, right? Free childcare. The lifestyles, the healthcare outcomes in many of these socialist countries do seem to be better, at least in some respects, right? So you have all of this, and I think it causes a lot of resentment for people who have bought into the lie of socialism that, you know, if we would just do these things here in the United States, things would be so much better. And I think the United States, you know, even though we have a pretty free, open economy, even though we have a prosperous economy, there's a lot of Americans in debt. There's a lot of Americans in debt with car payments, big mortgage payments, childcare costs are high. Here in the United States, you can literally, you know, buy clothes online or buy food, just even fast food like Uber Eats or Grubhub. You can put that on credit. and you can make interest payments on that. So that's a lot of the insanity going on. And so I think Americans, we bought into this consumerism mindset, and it's really probably just destroyed a lot of the quality of life that we could have if we were smarter with our money and more intentional. And so my solution to a lot of these issues where, women don't feel like they can stay home, that they don't have adequate health care, people feeling that just their paychecks don't go farther, is just to be smarter with your money. Stay out of debt. I think a lot of that as a guy, if any of you men are watching this channel, right, we have a huge part to play in this, right? And how we lead and how we seek to provide for our families. There's a lot of traps that we can fall into as men. Video games, just wanting an easy life, not having a motivation and drive because you're watching Netflix, because you're just on YouTube all the time. We have a big part to play in this as men, I think, in restoring better leadership in our homes, and that eventually trickles out to our communities, right? So I think the solution is better leadership, with people being drawn to socialism, communism, and men stepping up and leading, men stepping up and providing. If you talk to my wife, who has been a stay-at-home mom for the last 5.5 years since we had our first child, she has not lacked in healthcare. She's able to stay home with her kids. She does not have to work. She could work if she wanted to, but she does not have to, because I can provide for a family of 5, right? That didn't just happen on accident, though. It didn't just happen overnight. We had a plan in place before we got married and after, to live well below our means, to save up money so we could have a down payment on a house, to avoid, just getting caught up in consumerism and debt with vehicles, buying new furniture. We bought a lot of stuff used hand. The place that my wife and I are in today is because we've both been very intentional with our money. And I think a lot of people choose not to do that. A lot of people choose not to delay gratification, to live well below their means, so that my wife doesn't have to work. We don't need 2 incomes to survive, so that she can stay home with the kids. I know that a lot of people hear what I'm saying and they're like, well, you don't live in the area of the country that I live in. There's not any opportunities in my field of work to make more money. And I would just say that the American experience involves people leaving their jobs. It involves people moving. Many people my ancestors moved here mostly from Germany, right? And they settled in the Ohio River Valley. They left their lives in Germany, which was very congested. There wasn't a lot of property rights. There wasn't affordability. They didn't have freedom of religion. So they left Germany and came here so they could have freedom to do as they please, so they could have opportunity. And I still think that's relevant today. I think there are people that are so fixated in, this is what my picture of life should look like, and I'm going to live in the same place that my parents and grandparents lived. But I think in so having a narrow mindset, you sometimes sacrifice a better quality of life, better opportunities for your family. And so I would just say to those people, if you're in an expensive area to live, leave. If you're in a job that you don't like, be willing to go to a different industry, go to another state for a better job. And I think that is more closer to the DNA of Americans throughout our history, just whatever, like last 250 years of this being a free nation. That is our experience. And so to the men out there that are just thinking, I'm not in the position that I want to be in, my family's not in the position that I want to be in, I would just say, yeah, it's realistic not to get there in a year, even 2 years, but I would try to make a plan, invest in yourself, invest in skills, right? Maybe that is going back to school. Maybe that is going to a trade. Maybe that's taking some online classes to do a useful skill. Not that you're so much necessarily passionate about, but that you could do for 40 or 50 hours a week. So invest in a skill, invest in yourself. If you're in any kind of debt, if you've got car payments, if you've got truck payments, get out of those as soon as you can. Get out of them. It is a liberating thing when you make a pretty good income and all your money is not going out to payments every month. Something I did yesterday, I had some time to think about. I've had a really good year financially. We've made a pretty good income. I'm actually a traveling healthcare person, and my wife and I have done pretty good, and so we're trying to set ourselves up, our children up, our family up. We're thinking long term. So I have some extra money in the bank, and so I went ahead and set up an HSA account, and I was able to put a significant amount of money, I'm talking about thousands of dollars, into this HSA account, and then you get a tax advantage, when you do your taxes next year, right? So that's a big thing. But many people, unfortunately they don't have an extra $500, they don't have an extra $1,000, right? And so that's telling for how we're spending our money, how we're wasting our money, right? Because I believe the United States is still a very prosperous country. There's a lot of opportunities for everyone. You just have to go look for them, right? And so my wife and I have put ourselves in a position where, we can put several $1,000s to upcoming healthcare expenses that we know we'll need, if not next year, in the years to come. That money just stays there with an HSA account. And so, there's a saying, and a lot of people kind of scoff at this saying because they think that the wealthy people are profiting off of poor people. But there is a saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It's really kind of true when you think about it, because the more money that anyone has, the more of a cushion they have if there's some kind of an emergency. So then, let's say if somebody has $2,000 in the bank and, they need new tires, something happens, a windshield's cracked on their car, they have the money to fix it. If they have to send their children to the doctor, and spend a couple $100s because you have a high deductible plan, they have the money. They don't have to put it on credit. So, and in my case, if you have some extra money lying around because you've kept your expenses low, you've made good decisions, and you've stayed out of debt, that money can grow tax-free in a health savings account, and you store it for when you're going to need it. And so a lot of people don't put themselves in this decision, and I would argue they could put themselves in a better position. They could do a little bit better. You can't judge anyone's situation looking at anyone else, but for me, I have to look at myself and the opportunities I have and say, how can I use this? How can I use my resources, my talents to God's glory, but to better my family, to better my community, right? And so that's going to look a little bit different for everyone else, but the principle still applies. And so yeah, the rich do get richer and the poor get poorer. That's just how it goes, because the less money you have in your pocket, the more that's going out to debt, to credit, right? You are a slave in a sense, and that's a less money that you can invest for your future, less money you can invest towards your kids. And so I would just encourage the men here to create that extra margin in your life, in your budget, so you can do these things, so you can take care of your family, so your wife can stay home, so you're not stressing about taking your children to the doctor or an unexpected ER visit or a vehicle issue. I would encourage you men to work towards that. So yeah, this is Guy Against the Grain, bit of a rambling, right? Why is socialism so popular? I think it's a number of factors. It's a number of factors between just very poor spending habits of individuals, of families, a lack of leadership, a lack of industry with men not leading their families, not owning up, taking responsibility for themselves. It's a number of things. And so, yeah, just my thoughts. This is Guy Against the Grain. You have a good weekend. Bye.